it did absolutely change everything in my life. I mean, it made me happy again.
At 66 years old, Simon Cowell stands as one of the most recognizable figures in modern entertainment. For decades, he was the ruthless architect of pop culture, the sharp-tongued judge who could make or break a career with just one comment. From American Idol to The X Factor to Got Talent, his vision reshaped television itself, creating global franchises that reached hundreds of millions of viewers and launched stars who defined an era. The press once called him the most powerful man in television, and at the height of his career, it seemed untouchable was the only word that described him. But that was then. Today, Simon Cowell's life looks very different. The man who once thrived on attention has stepped back from the spotlight. Once defined by power and controversy, he now chooses family, privacy, and a quieter rhythm. He still works in the entertainment industry, but he is no longer the ruthless mogul he once was. His focus has shifted to legacy, health, and presence. To those who knew him as the sharp-suited judge who terrified contestants, this version of Simon almost feels unrecognizable. How did the most feared man on television become a father who builds his world around bedtime stories and bike rides with his son? How did the mogul who chased ratings across the globe become someone who now values peace over power? The truth is, the transformation didn't happen overnight. It came through scandal, heartbreak, ridicule, and even near-death experiences that forced Simon to change in ways he never expected. And before we begin, if you've ever admired Simon Cowell's influence on music and television, leave a like as a tribute to his legacy and share your favorite memories of him in the comments. To understand who Simon Cowell is today, you have to first remember who he was at the height of his power. For years, Simon wasn't just another television personality, he was the personality. His blunt critiques, raised eyebrows, and devastating one-liners made him both the villain and the star of every show he appeared on. When audiences tuned into American Idol in the early 2000s, it wasn't only to hear the contestants sing, it was to see what Simon would say next. His words could launch careers or crush dreams in a matter of seconds, and the world couldn't get enough of it. Behind that persona was a carefully crafted empire. After cutting his teeth in the music industry and building a reputation as someone who could spot commercial success before anyone else, Simon took that same formula to television. American Idol became a cultural phenomenon with millions of viewers debating his every comment. Then came the X Factor in the UK and Got Talent franchises that spread across more than 100 countries. By the mid-2000s, Simon wasn't just a judge, he was a global brand. Industry insiders called him the most powerful man in TV, because his opinion didn't just influence the fate of contestants, it influenced the future of the music business itself. But the very qualities that made him a household name also made him infamous. Contestants broke down in tears, tabloids labeled him TV's meanest man, and crowds often booed him on live television. And yet, Simon thrived on it. He understood that controversy drove ratings, and ratings fueled his empire. For a time, it seemed he had mastered the art of both business and entertainment, standing atop the industry with unrivaled control. Still, there was a price. Fame built on fear can only last so long, and the man who seemed untouchable on camera was, in reality, as human as anyone else. His rise as a ruthless mogul cemented his place in pop culture history, but it also set the stage for the downfall and reinvention that would follow. Because as powerful as Simon once was, life would soon remind him that even kings can be humbled. For years, Simon Cowell cultivated an image of absolute control. He was the man who sat behind the desk with the final say, whose judgment shaped careers and whose empire seemed unshakable. But in 2013, that carefully maintained image crumbled in front of the entire world. News broke that Simon was expecting a child with Lauren Silverman, the wife of one of his closest friends, Andrew Silverman. Overnight, the headlines exploded. Tabloids branded him a betrayer. Fans accused him of hypocrisy, and even fellow celebrities whispered about the scandal behind closed doors. For the first time, Simon Cowell wasn't the judge. He was the one being judged. The fallout was brutal. Andrew filed for divorce, long-standing friendships ended, and Simon's reputation took a hit that no amount of clever PR could fully erase. For a man who thrived on control, the scandal was devastating. He admitted years later, "It was not something I'm proud of." The mogul who had built an empire on ruthless confidence suddenly looked vulnerable, trapped in a personal drama that no television edit could smooth over. Yet from this chaos came the most unexpected transformation of his life. In February 2014, Simon welcomed his son Eric into the world. And with Eric's birth, everything changed. The man who once measured success in ratings and contracts began measuring it in laughter, Lego towers, and bedtime stories. He admitted openly, "My priorities completely shifted." The sharpest judge on television softened into a devoted father, and the experience saved him from a dangerous path. Fatherhood reshaped Simon in ways fans never expected. He became more private, more protective, and less obsessed with chasing the next big show. Instead of flying across the globe to oversee auditions, he arranged his schedule around Eric's milestones. The scandal that once threatened to ruin him had, in a twist of irony, introduced the only role that truly mattered, being a dad. But life rarely allows its biggest lessons without adding heartbreak. Just as Simon settled into fatherhood, tragedy struck, forcing him to confront grief and pain that would leave scars no audience could ever see. Just as Simon Cowell began finding his footing as a father, life delivered a blow that no amount of success could soften. In 2015, his mother, Julie Brett, passed away at the age of 89. To the public, it seemed like a natural end to a long life. But to Simon, it was shattering. Julie had been more than just a parent. She had been the quiet anchor in his turbulent childhood, the one person whose approval he never stopped chasing. He later admitted that losing her was the hardest thing he had ever endured. For a man who built his image on being unshakable, the grief stripped away his armor. That grief had barely settled before fate tested him again. In August 2020, Simon was at his Malibu home testing a new electric bike when disaster struck. A split-second mistake sent him crashing violently to the ground, shattering his back in multiple places. He was rushed into surgery, where doctors implanted a metal rod into his spine. For days, his family and fans feared the worst. Simon himself later admitted he came within a minute of not surviving the accident. Recovery was long and grueling. The man once known for commanding global audiences suddenly needed help just to stand. Walking required assistance. Every movement came with pain, and the thought of never being able to run around with his young son haunted him. But tragedy wasn't finished with him. In early 2022, Simon suffered yet another e-bike crash, this time breaking his arm and leaving his face bruised. Tabloids mocked him, calling him reckless and fragile, while social media turned him into a punchline. For Simon, it was cruel irony. The man once feared for his brutal honesty now became the subject of ridicule. These losses and accidents changed him in ways fame never could. They stripped away the ruthless mogul facade and revealed someone far more human, fragile, reflective, and aware of just how quickly everything can be taken away. In 2024, Liam Payne, one of the young men Simon had helped transform from an unknown teenager into a global superstar, was suddenly gone. At only 31 years old, Liam's fatal fall from a hotel balcony in Buenos Aires sent shockwaves across the world. For fans, it was an unthinkable loss. For Simon, it was devastating on a personal level. Liam Payne wasn't merely a contestant Simon had discovered on The X Factor. He was one of the cornerstones of One Direction, the band Simon had personally assembled and guided into becoming one of the most successful acts of all time. Simon had watched Liam evolve from a nervous 16-year-old with a dream into a man with the world at his feet. Losing him at such a young age was, as Simon confided to close friends, like losing a son. The impact was immediate and overwhelming. Across the globe, fans held vigils, social media flooded with tributes, and One Direction's music once again climbed charts as people clung to memories of what had been. But for Simon, the grief was private and profound. He canceled appearances, stepped away from ongoing projects, and kept close to home. Those around him noticed he became even more protective of his son Eric, holding him tighter, cherishing every moment as though aware of how fleeting life could be. For perhaps the first time, Simon's conversations shifted away from ratings, auditions, and empire building. He began speaking more about presence, about legacy, about the importance of family and time. Liam's death wasn't just a headline, it was a turning point that forced Simon to confront his own mortality and to recognize the fragile nature of everything he had built. And it was in this moment of loss that the man who once seemed larger than life began to embrace something far more enduring than fame, a quieter, humbler existence rooted in love, not power. At 66, Simon Cowell's life looks nothing like the empire-driven years that once defined him. The sharp-suited, sharp-tongued mogul who built global franchises now spends most of his time away from the spotlight, choosing family over fame. Instead of chasing ratings and contracts, his days are often centered around his son, Eric. Friends say he's rarely happier than when he's biking with him, helping with school projects, or simply sitting at home with Lauren and the family dogs. For a man who once thrived on attention, Simon now finds his peace in ordinary moments. Professionally, Simon still has influence. He remains an executive producer on Got Talent franchises and continues to shape the shows he created, but his role has shifted. He no longer feels the need to dominate every screen or sit behind every judging panel. Instead, he works behind the scenes, mentoring, advising, and focusing on the longevity of his creations rather than their immediate dominance. The man who once demanded control now delegates freely, trusting others to carry the torch he once held so tightly. Those who know him best say the change is striking. The ruthless judge who built a career on confrontation is softer now, more reflective. He laughs easier, listens more, and rarely shows the biting edge that once made him infamous. Even his physical presence has changed. Without cosmetic procedures, his face has aged naturally, and instead of resisting it, Simon has embraced it as part of his evolution. "I'd rather be real," he has said, echoing a philosophy that runs through his life today. The tragedies he endured, his mother's death, his near-fatal accidents, the ridicule over his appearance, and the shocking loss of Liam Payne, have reshaped him into someone far more human than the ruthless caricature audiences once loved to hate. At 66, Simon Cowell is no longer the king of primetime television, but a man who values presence over power, legacy over ego, and family over empire. And perhaps that is the greatest transformation of all. Not the mogul who built a kingdom, but the father and survivor who finally discovered peace. At 66, Simon Cowell's story is no longer about ruthless critiques or global empires. It's about survival, transformation, and presence. The boy who once felt invisible became the mogul who reshaped television, only to be humbled by scandal, heartbreak, and accidents that nearly cost him everything. Each tragedy carved away the ruthless image, leaving behind someone far more human, a father who finds joy in his son, a partner who values privacy, and a man who has learned that power fades, but love endures. Simon's legacy will always include the stars he discovered and the shows he created, but perhaps his greatest achievement is the peace he's found in simply living. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more forgotten Hollywood tales.